Hello everyone. Back again with film recaps. In this video, I'm going to recap one of the psychological thriller films from 2013, titled Side Effects. Before we get to the storyline, I'd like to wish everyone a happy and great day. Without further ado, let's get straight to the storyline. The movie opens in an apartment, where bloodstains are seen across the floor, and a present sits eerily on a chair. The scene then cuts to 3 months earlier, where we meet our protagonist, Emily, who has just arrived at a prison to meet her convict husband, Martin. After a brief chat, Emily says goodbye to her husband, and heads to work. There, she tells her boss she won't be coming in tomorrow, as it's a big day for her. The understanding boss grants her leave, and Emily thanks her for being so supportive during such a difficult time. Here, we learn that Martin is in prison for insider trading. The next day, Emily, accompanied by her mother-in-law, arrives at the prison with excitement. Turns out today is the day Martin is finally being released, and the two women greet him with eager smiles. The couple then returns to their apartment, where they make love after being apart for so long. Later, Martin tells Emily about a man he met in prison, who is a wealthy hedge fund worker. He claims the man will be out soon, and promises Emily they'll regain their lost fortune, but she doesn't look happy with his words. The next morning, we see Emily getting into her car, preparing to leave for somewhere. But then all of a sudden, something snaps within her. In the next scene, we meet a psychologist named Dr. Jonathan Banks. He arrives to talk with Emily, who has survived without major injuries. He understands that her crash was deliberate, and wonders what's tormenting her, but she doesn't answer. Jonathan suggests she stay in the hospital for a few days, but Emily insists she must be with her husband, who has just been released after 4 years in prison. She promises she will never try to hurt herself again, and agrees to regular checkups. After some insistence, Jonathan decides to release her, but prescribes her some medication to help prevent her from being sad. Cut to a few days later, Emily sits in a therapy session with Jonathan, revealing how she met Martin when she moved to New York to study graphic design. They got married in an instant, 5 years ago, when she was only 23. The doctor then asks if she's been in therapy before, and Emily admits she had, with Dr. Victoria Siebert in Greenwich. Jonathan asks if he can contact her, and Emily says she doesn't mind. Sometime later, Jonathan visits Victoria, who reveals that Emily once had a lavish life, but she lost everything after her husband went to prison, plunging her into depression. She adds that Emily always felt invisible to her father, which is why it's better for her to be seeing a male psychologist this time. Jonathan then shares how Emily has been struggling mentally, so Victoria suggests a new drug, Abelixa, which has proven effective with her other patients. Days later, Emily accompanies Martin to a lavish party on a yacht. But she's gripped by an unsettling discomfort, and heads to the bar alone to order drinks. All of a sudden, the weight of everything overwhelms her, and she begins to have a mental breakdown and cries. Thankfully, Martin understands her situation, so he quickly pulls her into a hug and takes her away from there. In the next scene, Emily stands at a subway station, her gaze fixed on an advertising poster for Abelixa. She then unexpectedly moves toward the train tracks and contemplates ending her life. But just as she nears the edge, a security officer grabs her shoulder and pulls her back from the brink. Elsewhere, Jonathan spends time with his wife, Deirdre, who is nervous about her upcoming job interview. Suddenly, Emily bursts in and frantically explains what she tried to do earlier. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Jonathan excuses his wife and takes Emily to a hotel. In the lobby, he urges her not to feel hopeless, reminding her that she has a bright future with Martin. Emily agrees, but insists she can't take the medication anymore, as it leaves her dizzy and causes insomnia. She mentions that her colleague, Julia, recommended another medication she'd like to try. Jonathan gives her the permission, and later, Emily is seen purchasing Abelixa at a pharmacy. In the following days, Emily seems to be doing much better after starting the new drug, and Martin is pleased to see her happy again. They even make passionate love to try and rekindle their relationship. However, around midnight, Emily suddenly blasts music at full volume, which jolts Martin awake. He notices breakfast set on the table, which confuses the hell out of him. It's then that he realizes Emily might be sleepwalking, possibly as a side effect of the medication. The next day, in Jonathan's therapy session, Martin voices his concern about Emily's constant sleepwalking. He wants her to stop taking Abilixa, but Emily vehemently refuses. She argues that since starting the drug, she's finally felt like herself again, and can make love with her husband. Left with no choice, Jonathan writes her prescriptions for other drugs to control the sleepwalking. The following day, Martin prepares for a work trip, and informs Emily that they'll likely be moving to Houston for his new job. This disappoints her for some reason, and she claims she thought they were moving back to Greenwich, so Martin promises her they'll meet great people in Houston. Days later, Martin returns home from the trip, and notices a present left on the chair. He also sees the table set for 3, which confuses him. And the shocking thing is when he finds Emily deeply focused on cutting vegetables.
You're sleeping again.
Emily stabs him multiple times, and the poor man begs her to call for help before finally collapsing dead. But even after all of this, an unfazed Emily calmly walks to her bed and falls asleep. Some time later, the cops show up at the apartment and take Martin's dead body away. An officer questions Emily about what happened, and if her husband mistreated her. But Emily, who is clearly distraught, denies it. She claims she woke up to find him dead and doesn't remember anything else. Not long after, Jonathan arrives at the station, and is stunned to learn that Emily has been arrested for murdering her husband. The district attorney interrogates him about Emily's condition, and her recent behavior. Jonathan argues that she could have been sleepwalking, a side effect of the antidepressants she had been using. The DA warns him that if Emily is a murderer, the case is clear, but if she's a victim of medical treatment, the blame will fall on him. This scares Jonathan, but he firmly states that the situation is much more complicated than that. Later, he visits Emily in prison, and confronts her about her actions. But she's still unable to remember what happened, and just states she doesn't want to see any more pills. Desperate, Jonathan meets with Victoria and asks for her opinion on the situation. She calmly assures him that therapists aren't in control of what their patients do, and he shouldn't worry. Jonathan is afraid Emily will be found guilty, but Victoria claims they won't charge her since she has no memory of the event. Elsewhere, Emily is visited by Martin's mother, who is devastated by her son's death. She tearfully asks what happened, but Emily insists she has no memory of it, and everything was caused by the Abilixa. She tells the old woman that she's written a statement to raise awareness about the medication's side effects. In the next scene, Martin's mother is seen reading Emily's letter on public television, where Emily apologizes for what happened. She hopes no one else has to endure the same ordeal, and places the blame entirely on Abilixa. Unfortunately, Emily's public statement devastates Jonathan's reputation, as he was the one who prescribed her the medication. The next morning, a swarm of tabloid journalists gathers outside his building, relentlessly questioning him about Emily. His family is also affected and unable to leave the house in peace. Even worse, Jonathan's other patients learn about the scandal, and begin to doubt his integrity as a therapist. Days later, it's the day of the trial, where Emily's lawyer argues that she wasn't conscious during the murder, and must be acquitted of all charges. Jonathan also testifies about her sleepwalking episodes, insisting she poses no real threat. After a tense trial, the court finally rules that Emily is not guilty of murder, but must be confined to a mental institution until it's certain she won't harm anyone again. Emily is devastated by the verdict, and blames everything on Abilixa, but she has no choice except to submit to the court's decision. On the other hand, Jonathan starts facing heat from his partners, who accuse him of destroying their firm's reputation. Desperate to clear his name, he digs into Abilixa, and stumbles upon an article published by Victoria, detailing the drug's dangerous side effects. Shocked and furious, Jonathan rushes to confront her, demanding why she never warned him about the side effects. But Victoria blames him instead, for failing to pull Emily off the drug the moment she started sleepwalking. Following this, Jonathan tracks down the garage attendant who first witnessed Emily's attempt to unalive herself. He is stunned to learn that she had been wearing her seatbelt during the crash, meaning she never truly intended to end her life. Suspicious, Jonathan visits her workplace and tries to find her colleague, Julia, the one who supposedly recommended Abelixa. But shockingly, there's no record of anyone by that name ever working there. That evening, Jonathan receives another shocking piece of information from a colleague. The Wall Street guys are buzzing after what happened with Abelixa. It turns out that ever since the company collapsed, its competitor has been skyrocketing on the stock market. The next day, Jonathan visits Emily, and informs her that he wants to give her sodium amytal, the truth serum. He explains that he'll ask her specific questions, and record her responses to help prove her innocence in court. He reassures her that she'll feel a sense of calm before becoming drowsy and eventually falling asleep. Emily hesitates at first, but reluctantly agrees to it. After administering the drug, Jonathan begins asking general questions about her, which she answers truthfully. But just as he's about to dive into more serious questions, Emily feels drowsy and ends up falling asleep. Afterward, Jonathan shows the footage to the DA, shockingly revealing that he never gave Emily sodium amytal, and it was only saline water. Despite that, she fell asleep, proving that she had been lying all along. Jonathan demands that she be arrested again, but the DA is exhausted by the entire ordeal, and dismisses him. He claims the case is already closed, and that reopening it would only make them look like failures. The DA thus urges Jonathan to let go of his obsession, and move on with his life. Realizing the DA is right, Jonathan finally decides to drop the case, and goes to visit Emily one last time. But as he checks the visitor log, he's shocked to see Victoria's name there. The suspicious man immediately confronts Victoria, demanding to know why she went to see Emily. Victoria calmly explains that Emily had called her in a panic state. She was scared after Jonathan administered the sodium amytal and interrogated her on camera. Afterward, Victoria pulls out a stack of photos from a box, in which we see Emily and Jonathan in a hotel lobby, but shockingly, they are followed by explicit images of Emily in bed. Victoria then instructs someone to deliver the photos to Manhattan. Later, when Jonathan arrives home, all hell breaks loose. His wife has already seen the explicit photos. She's leaving him, while Jonathan desperately tries to explain that he's been framed, but she doesn't believe him and leaves. That night, Jonathan receives a voicemail from Victoria requesting a brief meeting. When he arrives, the woman smugly threatens to ruin what's left of his career if he doesn't drop the obsession. But Jonathan begins to bluff, claiming that he knows the whole truth, as Emily told him everything. The bluff hits its mark, and Victoria suddenly erupts in rage, shouting for him to leave her and Emily alone. The next day, Jonathan arrives at the mental institution, and instructs the staff not to let anyone talk to Emily without his permission. He then informs Emily that he's decided to administer shock treatment since she's been refusing her medication. He even plays Victoria's voicemail, which leaves Emily in shock, and she insists he shouldn't be her doctor anymore. But an unfazed Jonathan claims he can't back out, because Victoria is paying him a substantial sum to be here. He also tells her it was Victoria's idea to administer the shock treatment, leaving Emily stunned. After Jonathan leaves, a worried Emily asks the warden to use the phone so she can call someone. But when they restrict her, she becomes very angry and screams, so the staff grab a sedative to calm her down. Elsewhere, Jonathan calls Victoria, saying he has an idea and wants to meet her. The next day, Emily is staring out the window when she spots Victoria outside, but her hope quickly fades as she sees Victoria meeting with Jonathan instead. Jonathan tells Victoria that Emily wants to go before a judge this week for some unknown reason. This worries her, so Jonathan assures her that he has come up with an idea that will benefit all of them. After a brief conversation, they part ways, while Emily grows anxious about what they might be plotting. The next day, Jonathan arrives with more medication for Emily and urges her to take it. But at this point, Emily, feeling betrayed by Victoria, decides to drop the act, and finally reveal the whole truth. Through a flashback, we see how happy Emily once was with her rich husband, who could provide anything she ever wanted. But then, out of nowhere, the FBI arrived to arrest Martin, causing her to lose everything. This led to Emily's depression, prompting her to seek help from Dr. Victoria. As time passed, they grew closer, and eventually started a passionate affair. Surprisingly, Victoria taught Emily how to fake psychological problems, while the latter shared her knowledge of the financial world, which she learned from Martin. In the end, they devised a plan where Emily pretended to love Martin, and made it seem like she was suffering from depression before she killed him. They also decided to fake the side effects of Abelixa, ensuring she would walk free without charges. This would also allow them to manipulate its stock prices, and gain huge profit by investing in its rival company. Everything would have gone perfectly if Jonathan had backed down after the trial, but he didn't. At this point, Emily reveals she never took any other drugs, and Abelixa had no effect on her. She also faked attempting to unalive herself, making sure there were always people around to witness that. Upon hearing all of this, Jonathan is stunned, and Emily pleads with him to release her. He hesitates, but she assures him that she has a much better deal than what Victoria offered him. In the next scene, it's another trial for Emily, with Victoria also present in the court. Jonathan declares that, after her time in confinement and proper treatment, Emily is no longer mentally ill. He insists that she doesn't have any violent tendencies, and is fit to return to society. As a result, the court decides to release Emily, allowing her the opportunity to begin a new phase of treatment under the close observation of Jonathan. After finally gaining her freedom, Emily rushes to Victoria's office, and they immediately begin making out. Victoria asks her if she told Jonathan anything, but she swears she hasn't. Emily also inquires about the money they made from the stock market, and Victoria reveals it's safe in 2 accounts, one in Dubai and one in Grand Cayman. But then, as they excitedly discuss their future plans, Victoria notices something under Emily's clothes, which turns out to be a device. She accuses Emily of betraying her, but the latter claims she didn't give her much choice. As Victoria is about to leave, she finds cops outside, who immediately arrest her for fraud and conspiracy to murder. The following day, a confident Emily walks into Jonathan's office, expecting a warm reception. But he suddenly prescribes her some medicine, leaving her confused. He also orders weekly urine tests, warning her that failing to comply will send her back to the asylum as per the terms of her release. This makes Emily furious, and she begins yelling at Jonathan for breaking his promise. However, he calmly states that if she behaves like this, he has no choice but to send her back to the asylum. As Emily storms out, she encounters her lawyer and Martin's mother, who finally knows that her son was intentionally murdered. A terrified Emily then runs from the building, only to find several officers waiting outside. They apprehend her, and take her into custody once again. The movie ends with Jonathan reconciling with his family, gradually finding a sense of normalcy after the chaos he's endured. Meanwhile, we see Emily back at the asylum, where she seems to have actually lost her mind now. Okay guys, thanks for watching. See you again in the next video.